my name is David Reske, CEO of Nowspeed Marketing, and welcome to this edition of In the Now, where we focus on uncovering the myths and misunderstandings of marketing and leadership with some of the world's most interesting people. And my guest today is Gregory Kennedy. Gregory has spent over 20 years in global marketing, content, brand, communication strategy for high-tech companies, including InMobi, Nextroll, and Sojourn. Gregory is a former creative director and two-time head of marketing who specializes in helping take startups from zero to scale, and he currently works as a fractional CMO. Gregory, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Sounds like you've been busy over the last 20 years. You've done a lot of amazing things.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So, I wanted to ask you before we get started on talking about our Mythbuster question. You've been both a creative director and a head of marketing, very different roles. Which do you like better?
Oh yeah, this is a fun question. So when I was going back to school to get my marketing degree, they asked me that in class, and so I told them that at least for me as a creative director, I felt like I was 85% marketing, 10% high school principal, and 5% creative. So if I gave up the 5% creative, it was basically the same job, and that's still how I feel about it today.
Very cool. Well, you've done some amazing things, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. So, as you know, I like to start these conversations with a Mythbuster question, and you and I had a great conversation about AI before the show. So, I wanted to ask you in our Mythbuster question, the myth I want to bust is really, that AI is simply a marketing productivity tool that will help us write faster, and it actually doesn't do that very well. True or not true?
Yeah, excellent question. I've been experimenting it like a lot of people since it was like popularized, let's say, with ChatGPT 3.5. I mean, they had OpenAI. A lot of these tools have been around for a while, but I think they had a real breakthrough recently with the version that came out over the winter, where it provided this experience where it passed what's popularly called the Turing test, right? It's an old test that a computer scientist developed many years ago that said, hey, how do we know if AI is like human-like or sentient? Well, can it pass a quiz where you were typing in questions and you couldn't tell if it's human or not? And so we've clearly reached that point. I think there's a lot of debate in the computer science world, which I am not a computer scientist, of course, whether that's the correct test to determine if AI or computers have become sentient and are conscious. Like, I think for the most part, it's safe to say popularly we would believe that perhaps it's not, but I'll leave that to the experts. So, through my experimentation with it, in the beginning, like, I was very excited about the efficiency that I could get from it, right? Like, I started in the old days of advertising, like literally the Mad Men world, where it's like write 100 taglines, write 100 headlines. And so that kind of exercise today obviously is much easier to do with AI. But I quickly saw that the technology opened up new possibilities, and marketers were able to apply it to do new things. I think it's very much like when you expand a freeway, you add another lane and the capacity gets used up, and I haven't found traffic to be any faster. And I'm sure that you feel the same way, right? That widening roads just accommodates more cars, doesn't actually make it go faster. And I think, or at least my premise is that AI will end up doing the same thing for marketing. I think today, there's a challenging economy right now in the tech space. I'm here in the Bay Area. Like, you could argue that there's a recession on. So I think there's a lot of focus right now on efficiency, and there's a narrative that AI is going to take jobs away, and I don't believe it at all. I think that the data we have so far indicates that's not what's happening. Like, truck drivers are in demand. Like, we do not have a self-driving truck. That was a big narrative like a couple of years ago, right? That they were going to go away. And like, I don't think we're anywhere close to even eliminating truck drivers or pilots, and those things have a lot of automation, right? So through my experimentation, what I found was that, AI unlocks doors for people to do a lot more. And I know for myself, like, I started doing things like creating like large tables of data and information and putting those in a ChatGPT and getting it to summarize it, and unlocking like new possibilities and new ways to work with it. So at a high level, yeah, that's my premise about AI and what I think it's going to enable in marketing, and perhaps like in the larger world with other people in other industries.
So let's take a little bit of a step back for people that haven't experimented with it as much as you have. What are the first things people, marketers, starting to do with AI? How do people kind of get involved with it in the first place?
Yeah, great question. I mean, there's a lot of different tools out there, so maybe let's even categorize them. There's a whole set of like writing tools, and I think that that's where a lot of marketers are experimenting today. There's even a survey that I found about different industries and like who's using AI today, and marketers at the top saying 37% are incorporating AI into their workflow already. My guess is that it's on the writing side. There are other tools out there in the AI space that do all kinds of other things, like people have heard of perhaps Midjourney that creates images automatically. There's other tools that create website UI automatically. There's a lot of stuff happening. I think the writing side is probably what a lot of the more forward-thinking marketers are familiar with. And so the tools where you have like a chat interface and you can type in a question and it writes information back. And the more the experiments with it, more you understand that you can give it instructions and it will give you back text. So if you're in a profession or area where you do a lot of work in the written form, you can ask it questions like write headlines for this, take these headlines and edit them for me. And that's what I started with. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing today.
So if about a third of marketers are already using it, what are the other 2/3 doing? Are we just ignoring it? Are we kind of just hoping it'll go away? Or, what are 2/3 of marketers, why isn't everybody trying it so far?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think I do know there are a lot of large companies that have completely restricted access for a number of reasons, copyright reasons, legal reasons, other reasons, and if you work in like a regulated industry, finance, healthcare, which is a huge portion of the economy, they don't just adopt tools randomly. I work in a lot of more small companies, forward-thinking companies, companies where experimentation is perhaps encouraged, at least in the teams that I've been on. So our ability to adopt tools and experiment things is something I'm very familiar with, very comfortable with. But that's not, I think, the normal case for a lot of people out there. And so my guess would be that the way that question is written too, incorporating your workflow. So if you're in a regulated business, you're definitely not using it on a regular basis.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the ways to kind of get beyond the writing. And then we'll maybe talk about how to make them more effective with better prompts. So it feels like this whole area of prompts is really become a key way to think about using the tool effectively. But let's go beyond the simple writing tasks. What are some of the ways that you're finding that people are using ChatGPT and the most common ways to be more effective?
Yeah, it's built into a lot of products that marketers use already, and perhaps people actually don't know that. So if you buy advertising on any digital platform, the core elements that optimize those campaigns are incorporating all kinds of leading edge artificial intelligence and have for many years. So if you upload a campaign or launch a campaign on like a Facebook or Google, any of those platforms, AI is what's automating that. Like if you understand advertising to some degree, like you've got where the ad is shown, the time of day, there's all kinds of information that goes along with it. And there's a lot of it, right? And so they're able to use that information and optimize the campaigns with AI. An individual just wouldn't be able to manually do that. So that's one example that like a lot of people actually are using and just aren't aware of it. And if you take that theory, you could apply it to everything. Like there's AI in all aspects of our life that we're on a perhaps narrow use case, right?
Yeah. That's such an interesting one, advertising AI, because my firm Nowspeed, we do a lot of digital advertising management, and I just had a podcast interview with someone talking about direct mail, and he was kind of talking about the ways to do direct mail effectively, but it just strikes me that I don't know of any ways other than better writing. You're not getting the same AI efficiencies with direct mail that you might be with digital advertising, or are you? Is it working in an area that I don't expect, just like it's working in many other areas?
Yeah, I mean, I like direct mail as a channel right now because I think there's an overemphasis on digital because it's easy, it's fast, it's instant, it's very gratifying. So I think direct mail actually remains a great channel to utilize, and there's some unique ways that you can target the stuff. I mean, yeah, it's obviously more challenging to incorporate the technology in the same way, but it's still possible to use it to do the segmentation or the targeting, depending on what you're trying to do in the direct mail space.
Yeah, good point. I'm sure it'll be part of that ecosystem as well. Let's get back to the a piece of this myth that I want to explore with you, and that's the part that it doesn't do it very well. Because I think that's a big myth among marketers today. A lot of people, it's very easy to put a post on LinkedIn and say, "Hey, ChatGPT is a great tool," and you'll get 10 comments that say, "Yeah, but it doesn't do it very well. It's not as good a writer as I am. It can't be as creative. It can't be as thoughtful." How do you get tools like ChatGPT or Bard or other tools like that to be as effective as possible in the
Yeah,
writing realm? Let's
yeah.
just focus on writing for a second.
I feel the same way. It's not as good as I am at writing. The way I think about it is, I think the best analogy with like the writing tools today is that they are calculators. And so if you think how a calculator is used, you still need a mathematician to develop the algorithm. And I think about it the same way. So like if I'm going to write a white paper, or I'm going to run a social media account, or I'm going to write a case study, it still needs an architect to develop the like strategy and the flow and the narrative and the order. And like ChatGPT is not good at that stuff, and it doesn't have the information required to do a good job. Like depending on your business, case study is a great example. Like it just doesn't have the specifics of the case study for your business, so you would need to give it that information, right? And then at like a higher level, uh, uh, it's like the calculator example where I'm gonna write a white paper, it can help me with some headlines, it can help me with some sections, or sometimes I notice like at night, I'm still working, I'm tired, and I can't get a sentence to construct it this right way, the way I would like it to be. And so I'll put in the chat GPT and say, like, just can you fix this? And it'll do it, which is excellent. And so I think that's some like efficiency there. And that's what I think of as like a calculator. Like I'm too tired to do this long division. Let me just have the computer do it. But it's not able to architect the full algorithm that's powering something, right? So I look at it the same way, and I think that will remain. There's another important point for me, which is that it's only as good as the data it's trained on. And so the more that I experimented with it, the more that I saw that like there's certain things that it can do really well because it's got a lot of data. So you can have it say like, do it in this tone of this person, right? And if it's a well-known person, it's able to mimic that person. But if you go really deep and ask it a lot of questions or a lot of versions, it doesn't have enough training data to continue to mimic that person. And if they're more lesser known, it's not good at it, right? So there's like limitations on the data side. So you can't go and tell it like, hey, assume the personality of Plato, and then answer this question. And like the answers are amazing. It's really powerful. But there's a limit. There's a limit to it because there's only so much data that I was trained on. Even with Plato, it was actually well understood, and there's a lot of information in the public domain. So that part's great. So for me, yeah, like you can easily run into the limits once you start using it on a regular basis.
So, what do you say to those two-thirds of marketers who are not using it, who are saying, it's got limits? It doesn't have the complete data set. It's a calculator. It's not the engineer. I'm going to wait until it's really better before I start using it. What do you say to those people? Should they wait? Should they experiment with it now? How do
Yeah,
they
that's a really good question. I mean, I would always, for me, like fall on the side of innovation and like you want to like at least be knowledgeable and experiment with it, understand what's going on. But if you think you should look at your individual use case and be really clear about like what makes sense and what doesn't, there are like legal questions that are still open ended. We don't know the answer to. I think right now the general consensus is that there will be some kind of copyright restrictions or law that's put into place that may impact how it's used. So for certain use cases, you want to take that into consideration. Actually, because I worked in advertising, like I should understand this pretty well. I've spent a lot of time with a lot of lawyers about like what's required to pass certain copyright laws and stuff. And while there's no actual consensus, it has a lot to do with like how many edits you make. So if you're familiar with that and you're comfortable with that, um, I would encourage you to experiment with it, but take that into account, right? There was a famous case of a lawyer recently who used ChatGPT to write a brief, and he didn't review the brief carefully. and it made up a case, which is really interesting. So obviously, like, I think it's something that people need to like be aware of, experiment with. If you're not comfortable with it because you work in a certain industry or area where there's concerns about using this type of technology, like, yeah, I think that makes sense. But I wouldn't discount it entirely. And I do think that like even for those industries, there will be solutions available in the next couple of years.
Can you talk about some of the use cases you've seen kind of beyond writing where people are starting to use it effectively? In other areas where people are starting to experiment with it. What have you seen out there?
Yeah, I mean, beyond writing, there is like a host of tools that are amazing. I mean, I've seen demos in San Francisco where you could talk to your phone and give it instructions, and it would create a website based on the words you spoke. Like I was quite surprised with that, and it was like a pretty decent website. I mean, it wouldn't pass the it wasn't the quality you need to like put it into production from a marketing perspective, but it did create a demo that you could use internally or use for a personal website. So people are experimenting with all kinds of things out there. I have seen more professional tools that automatically create UI examples. So I do think there's stuff on the design side where a lot of the creative ideation stuff will get more and more automated. So you'll be able to just press a button and it'll generate a bunch of advertising design for you without having to actually, do the mechanics yourself. You would feed it like concepts or photographs, layouts that you like, which we have something like this today. Like you log into a lot of different tools. They provide templates already. Like most people are picking up some kind of template. So I don't think like auto-generated templates are all that actually earth-shattering if you consider where we're at today. I do think what changes it is the speed and the ability to kind of iterate. You could sit with somebody and just be like, "Do you like these?" and just keep going until they get one that they like. So that's kind of interesting. There's also some of the back end when it comes to like email targeting, that type of stuff. There was a case study that the American Marketing Association was actually using it to automate subject line creation for email marketing and was getting really good results. So you see people doing things like that, like incorporating it into other aspects of marketing to power targeting or performance or generate content in a way that you couldn't do in the past, like a personalized subject line while they're possible. They weren't very good, or they had to use like a set of headlines you had created, earlier. But people are actually auto generating them now based on data, which is pretty interesting and different from what we've done in the past.
Yeah. So it feels like we're going to see more capabilities like that come out, and maybe more integration with other marketing tools like email marketing tools, website tools. And it feels like, one of the things that I think we're seeing as a creative and marketing agency is that if you have someone who's not that engaged in their job, it's easy to kind of see a tool like this as something that, hey, just makes my job easier. I don't have to work with the ads. I just tell it to create the ads and I use those ads. I don't have to create the images. I don't have to create the headlines. I just do it. But for the really smart marketers, it kind of gives you a starting point. It gives you more ideas to work with, more things to think about. It's almost like a research engagement assistant, I've found, that can help you kind of get things done. Are people kind of using it that way? Or am I kind of unique in thinking about that? Is like this research assistant who can, okay, give me 10 ideas like this, or give me some ad ideas, and then I'll use it to kind of take it all the way and finish it up.
Yeah. This is really interesting debate, and I don't think people know the answer. There's like almost two sides to this discussion where it's like, does it give talented people superpowers and they become like way beyond the capabilities that they were before, or does it make people with less ability average or above average, right? And there's this like, and how is this going to play out? Right? Like I think there's two ways of looking at it, and I don't think anybody actually knows the answer. I've seen examples and studies that say both are happening. So for me, like at a high level, I find actually both examples or both outcomes very encouraging. So the idea that like a bunch of customer service reps without as much training as the more advanced ones can get to a pretty competent level quickly is really interesting. I think that's actually really good for society. I think that like the ability to kind of take people who have less training and ability and get them up to speed fast and have them be productive in the workforce is excellent. And I think that use case across the board in marketing, outside of marketing, like you're a junior marketer, you can actually rip out some headlines now and content. It's really good. And you can do it quickly and efficiently and get to a level that would take a lot more time. I actually think that's really powerful and that it's really good for the world. I think it'll make the efficiency of like businesses much higher. The other flip side of that is like, does it make people who are really talented like super talented? And like there's examples of that. Like it's hard to say at this point. I think it's perhaps too early. I think that as we explore more, those use cases will emerge. And so I guess as I think about this, like I think it's inevitable that somebody who's very talented will do something really incredible with it, and we'll start to see that kind of gap where there's just some people who are able to take it and do things that no one expected, and it'll be amazing. And I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited about both of those examples that you shared. And I feel like, I don't know if I'm unique in this area. I feel like in some things I'm talented. I can use it to add that superpower. And in some things I'm below average and I need it to help me get to average and I can be competent. So maybe it'll be both of those for both of us. One of my observations in hiring people, especially salespeople, I found is that many of them come with poor writing skills. And maybe that's a generalization. I'll get some bad comments on this podcast because of that. But it feels like if you can take someone who's maybe very effective verbally and with confidence, like many salespeople are, and you can use this as a tool to take their writing skills to an excellent level. It really can help, like you said, maybe those average people with average abilities come to a level of competence that helps them be super effective. So that could be a great outcome for tools like this. But we have to want to use it, right? We have to kind of want to use it. So let me ask you a little bit about the barriers here. We've still got those 2/3 of marketers who are not using it. What else is kind of keeping us back from trying this tool, from using it, from kind of getting the most out of it?
Yeah. There's definitely a group of people who just are, unhappy with change, perhaps, right? Like, and everyone has this kind of like natural resistance. Like you've progressed in your career, you at a certain point, things work well for you, and you're like, why do I need this? So I remember, I think everybody can remember an example of like any new technology that comes out. There's a group of like, incumbents or laggards, or there's tons of terms for these types of like segments who say like, I don't need email. I remember like people when I was young and I thought email was exciting. They'd been in business a long time and they're like, my business is successful. We're profitable. Like I have a great job. Like, why do I need this? And I think that's a legitimate question for people to ask. I think the same thing is people are asking today with AI. It's like, look, I'm doing really well with my PR agency or my content marketing job. Like, what do I need this for? And it's a bit challenging because it's disruptive to your workflow, to the industry, to what you do. And so there's a natural like negative reaction to these types of things. And for me, like I've just always been a very optimistic person, and I think that's fun. I think that's interesting. I like learning new things. I love to think about the implications of new technology and how it's going to make things better. And so for me, like change is good. But you have to have the right like attitude about it. You could look at it and say like, I don't want to learn something new. I like the way things work, right? So if you take that approach, definitely like this isn't necessarily something that is exciting to you. But I think the reality is that it's here and it's coming, and like people are gonna have to figure out how they live in a world where these tools are available, and it's going to change the nature of jobs, right? And so for me, at least my entire career has always been one where technology has been rapidly evolving and changing what I do, and so I'm very comfortable with that. And I've kind of almost like built a career on that premise that like what I was doing was going to change, and made certain decisions actually that were based on the idea that some technology I was really good at when I was younger, I assumed it was going to go away, and I didn't want to actually be very good at it. because I thought that that skill would not be valuable in the future. And I was right. Like the technology doesn't exist anymore, right? So it just depends on your worldview and stuff. I think like the average person is like, I'm great at writing. I like my job. I like the way things work today. How do I get comfortable with this? I would just say like experiment, test, learn, and understand that it's a calculator. Think of it in that way, right? Like you don't need to like do long division anymore by hand. You just go to the calculator and figure it out, and you plug it in to your like whatever you're doing, right? I would look at the same way.
And I'm always, you and I have been in the business of marketing for many years. We've seen these technologies kind of come and add new capabilities. And I'm always impressed by the way that some things that we think are going to be simple, and I love your email analogy. When email first came out, many people thought about that as a replacement for direct mail. And so, oh, wow, we're sending out a letter a month. Now we can send out an email a month. Nobody kind of thought, maybe in the first few years of that, wow, now we can send an email a day. Now we can automate email. Now we can have triggers. Now we can have personalized emails, personalized subject lines. We can have marketing segments of one. This whole like new, because these things open up new capabilities, right? One of the things we're experimenting with now in our content marketing service with AI is related to SEO. Is that in the past we might write a few SEO related blog articles a month to try to get some new SEO keyword working. Now we can take that up by an order of magnitude, in terms of content productivity. But what if everybody does that? Well, we all have now we have an explosion of content. Now, what if we have an order of magnitude more content? What does that mean for competitiveness? So I don't know. Are there some things you're seeing now that maybe the rest of us can't foresee in terms of like what could happen in a year or two? Like what new capabilities might emerge from this that many of us are not even seeing today?
Yeah, this came up in a talk I did a couple of weeks ago at an AI event in San Francisco regarding SEO. I think this is an important question. I don't know all of the answers. Like, so you've got this one dimension, which is that the ability to create content, SEO generated content, is going to grow exponentially. And I know examples of people out there who are like, they're generating like hundreds of blog posts a day. Like they're doing stuff that is mind boggling in terms of what you used to be able to do, right? And people can argue it's spam, it's this, it's that. The reality is like they're doing it, and I've seen the results, which also was surprising. That there was perhaps like a tweet or an article from Google saying like, well, we're going to block AI generated content, but they're not good at figuring out what is AI generated and what's not. Because I've seen the charts where they're getting all the articles spidered into Google, and the search engine traffic is increasing. So I think there's this moment in time where there's this arbitrage opportunity and people are taking advantage of it. It's not my favorite approach, but there's people who are doing it, right? So I think the outcome, like you're describing, was that there are people who do that, and then it'll perhaps reduce the impact of SEO overall because everyone starts doing that. It's like a zero sum gain in in content creation. I also think the obvious like response from Google is to change how the algorithms work. Mm-hmm. And if you look recently, what they've done, it's very different than how it was in the past, and they've pushed a lot more of their own content or sponsored content, and I think that will continue. So I guess in some ways, I'm not all that bullish on SEO in the long term. I think that Google changes, AI changes, that it gets harder and harder to just generate traffic from SEO, and you'll have to invest a lot more into it, like hiring people to create thousands of blog posts or whatever it is. It becomes an area that is oversaturated and challenging. But like my initial premise is that new things will emerge, and I think that that's already starting to happen. That's what I love about marketing, is like it's constantly evolving, and there's one avenue that perhaps closes, but a new avenue opens up.
Yeah, well, one of the things on the SEO front that I've seen recently from Google is that they said, hey, we've been allowing AI generated content for years. Think about travel data and hotel data and airline data. All of that's really computer generated content that they index and make available to all of us. So there, as long as the content is high quality, it feels like they're going to allow it. But they may change that policy in the future. We'll have to watch it closely. One of the things that I've seen recently is that, in content marketing is that companies struggle to create enough content for all the products, all the services across the whole buying cycle for every persona that they've got. And AI technology really allows them to fill out all that content. So there could be a world where even a small company without a huge budget can afford to really tell all the stories, have all the information for all their customers. It could end up really serving their customers better. Forget SEO for a second, but they could just really have the content they need to communicate effectively with all their target market segments across all their products, across the whole buying cycle. So I'm kind of optimistic that we'll get a better consumer experience from all this content instead of a worse consumer experience that's spammed. But maybe I'm an optimist as well. So I don't know how you feel about that.
I think it depends on your definition of spam, perhaps. Like, I don't know, I go on TikTok, I'm a bit horrified by all the content. It all looks like spam to me. I think it just depends on your perspective ultimately. I do think the idea that it'll unlock doors for smaller companies is excellent. And I think that's very true. And so creating all of the content you need across the funnel, across all your personas, across all your products will get faster, will get easier, will get better. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think that's great, right? Will SEO traffic be harder to generate? For some people, perhaps. For some people, it won't be. Some people, it'll be better, right? So I don't think it's hard to predict exactly where the stuff goes. But I am excited about the way that it unlocks doors for people. And I think that's been the history of technology in a lot of ways, right? Like start with things that are sold at the enterprise level and they're very expensive, like mainframes, and maybe get cheaper, and now you've got a computer in your pocket, right? You walk around. So similar in that, content marketing was expensive. Now it's less expensive, and it'll get even easier to do going forward, which will mean more people will be able to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that the history of marketing technology, it means that it has become easier and easier for smaller companies to do a great job. I even think of the whole influencer craze right now. You have individuals who have tens, hundreds of thousands, or maybe millions of followers, where in the past it would have only been a movie star or a anchor person who's on national television who could attract that kind of an audience. And it's really because of technology. So we'll see what this new technology allows us to do. But Gregory, this has been a fascinating conversation. You're clearly at the leading edge of all of this. You're learning and growing, and I really appreciate you sharing your experience with us. Thank you very much for taking the time today.
Yeah, of course. That was a excellent conversation, and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and if people want to get in contact with you to learn more about your CMO services or how you work with companies, how would they do that?
Yeah, 2 ways. Just search Gregory Kennedy on LinkedIn. I have the original URL. And then if you want to look for my website, name my agency is called Brand Zen, and the URL is wearebrandzen.com.
Wearebrandzen.com. Perfect. Thanks, Gregory. I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Excellent. Thank you so much.